What's up, basketball fans? Welcome to the NBA Outlet presented by OTGBasketball.com. I'm your host, Nick Fay. No Corey Waldron today, but I got two guests, Jack Manuell and special guest Nick LeTourneau of WNBA Insider, Nets Daily, Charity Stripe, and his newest work, Nets Republic. What's up, guys?
Doing great. How are you?
I mean, I can't compare to that, so I think, should I leave and let you guys do your thing? Because I'm in the presence of greatness. As I tweeted out earlier, I'm not worthy.
Oh, Jack,
please, you're going to make me get a big head.
I'll let you do that. You guys deserve it. You guys deserve the hugest heads in the world.
Well, thank you.
Jack, also, not to sell you short, you're co-host of me with the Brooklyn Buzz as well. JBT, one of the best Australian pods out there, so check out Jack's stuff too.
Cheers.
With these guys today, we're going to preview the Nets, probably two of the best guys you can have talking about Brooklyn basketball. Before we get started, though, just a quick reminder, you can check out the show on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, and Dash Radio. Before we look forward to next season, we're going to look back at last year. Nets were 28-54. In my opinion, had a really fun season. What were your thoughts on last year?
I know for me, it wasn't so bad. The season before was painful. I mean, there were so many injuries, and there were still some injuries last season. But it showed that there was a plan and things are kind of moving in the right directions. The kind of showed that the Nets are trying to build a system that's similar to Houston's as far as having a dynamic, creative guy on ball in D'Lo. They are going to really focus on doing nothing but layups and three-pointers to try to eliminate the mid-range stuff, which is exactly what Houston does. And they've done a good job of developing all the pieces on the roster. I mean, everyone that has been there has kind of been worked on a little bit, either flipped for a new piece, some draft picks, a new player, and everyone that's been around the Nets organization the past couple of years for sure has really improved. So I've been really impressed.
Yeah, I mean, the only person who took mid-ranges was Rondé, and he did them at such a high clip that, they were an efficient shot. Yeah, I completely agree with what Nick was saying. There was just so much improvement from an organization that has shown so little over maybe the past 3 years or so. And to see that, coming from the coach and coming from the players, coming from the organization as a whole, and we've talked about on the Brooklyn Buzz plenty, Nick, just the amount of respect that now the Nets are garnering. Former current coaches, shouting out Coach Kenny after games, whether it was in close loss or in a win. It seems like, the Nets are being put on the map, and it's fun to finally see and for us to finally get the respect that we're deserving.
Yeah, like you guys said, it was finally nice to see the Nets get some respect around the league. Previous seasons, they were kind of the laughing stock. And then obviously having that structure in place and the player development, I think I was really excited about. Dealing with the injuries, Jeremy Lin going down game one, D'Angelo missing a lot of time, Rondé and LeVert missing a lot of time in February where they went 1-9. So I thought the team did a great job of kind of bouncing back and staying competitive. And we all know about the bad luck they had with the referees and closing out late games. So I think last year, as much as people would look at it and kind of think I'm crazy, I think it was a successful season.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you define success as. But in terms of what, we talked about the refs thing, and we'll probably get to that with our disappointments. But I think overall, if you're building a culture, building up a team from the ground up, the first season of that with Coach Kenny, Sean Marks, and everyone else, you can only consider it a success. We could have had 30-plus wins, but, 28 is a fine number for a team that doesn't have right now the all-star talent that it could potentially have with D'Lo and such. But yeah, I think it was a successful season as well.
Anytime you jump 8 games in the win column, I think that's a positive. But moving on from there, what would be your highlight of last season for the Nets?
I think my biggest highlight was the surprise emergence of Jared Allen. I mean, he was something else. At the beginning of the year, everyone was kind of talking about him maybe needing to go to the G League and spend some time in Long Island or work on his game or bulk up a little bit. And all that's still true. But I mean, he kind of right off the bat knows how to play a role, does it really well, started with just dunking over everyone, then kind of brought the defense stuff. And later in the season, his confidence was up, and he was starting to attempt a three-pointer every now and again and hit some other shots and show improvement in the post game and finishing through contact. And now, I mean, he's the clear-cut starter to me. I know we're going to talk about that later. And really, I mean, he looked like someone that could be a borderline all-star one day when it was all said and done, if he works on the right stuff and gets to the level that I know he could get to.
Yeah, the fact that he's shown so much so quickly, Nick, I think it just proves, we've compared him on the Buzz and other pods to like Clint Capella, those sort of guys. And in terms of the amount of maturation that he's shown, the amount of sort of skills that he's shown at such a short rate in his first season alone, he didn't play a full 82-game season, mind you, either. Obviously, his body wasn't necessarily ready for that, but he looks to be, very NBA ready, towards the end of the season, those last sort of 30 games or so. He proved, and then some, that he is a fully fledged starter and a borderline all-star going forward. But for me, because I was in so many different countries, whenever I could see a Nets win, that was a highlight. And I had a couple. Also, I will preface with this saying, if you don't know, I am a Joe Harris stan. There aren't many of them out there, but I'm a Joe Harris stan. For me, Joe Harris was a highlight of the season, #1 in driving percentage. Take that, LeBron James, one of the #1 three-point shooters after the All-Star break. So the fact that Joe Harris didn't make the three-point shooting contest was an absolute travesty. And 2019, it's happening again. I'm going to be the #1 person on that bandwagon. But yeah, the wins for me. Win number 25 against Miami at the end of March. That OT win was awesome. Ronda had an awesome night. The win against Detroit was one of the highlights. I saw that, and Spencer Dinwiddie putting Andre Drummond in the blender. It was just insane. And funnily enough, he had an Instagram post about it today, and him and Andre Drummond were having a bit of banter, which was quite fun. And then the probably Knicks' favorite win, I would be guessing, was the win in Mexico against OKC, where Karis LeVert it was almost like his coming out party in ways, but it was a full strength OKC squad, and the fact we could get that win. The next night we did lose to the Miami Heat, but it was just a real highlight of the season for me.
Yeah, I definitely like that OKC one. Not only did LeVert have a big game, but I remember Jared Allen getting a block on Melo, and that was kind of a big moment for him.
Yep.
But I'm going to go with Jared Allen as well. Like you said, all the growth we've seen. I know me personally, I thought he would spend time in the G League. That didn't happen. I was happy about it, and now he's a building block for this team moving forward. I think we'd all be pretty confident to expect him to be a starter for the next Nets moving forward if everything goes right. Are there any other highlights for you guys?
I think the coaching staff and just the overall player development that we saw from Coach Kenny, what he was able to prove as an unproven coach, but there's a lot of new coaches going into next season, out in Phoenix, in Atlanta, and so many other places. There's so much, riding on what they can do and how they can prove themselves. Coach Kenny did that in spades. There was a lot of questions surrounding him. Nets Twitter really got on him sometimes, and I think quite unfairly. Yes, he had his moments, but he was a rookie coach. So yes, his rotations might have been up and down, but I think Coach Kenny, and I think Nets Daily had a really nice piece in the fact that, Coach Kenny could almost be the face of the franchise right now. Until D'Lo sort of proves himself otherwise, I would disagree and sort of say I think Sean Marks right now is almost the face of the franchise. But yeah, Coach Kenny and Sean Marks, Markinson, Atkin Marks, whatever you want to call it, their sort of synergy was a real highlight for the Nets, and it's sort of shown that in the fact that we're attracting possible free agents, superstars in 2019. So for me, their sort of synergy from the get-go, as soon as that presser was there, was probably another highlight for me.
Yeah, I totally agree. In Marks we trust. Shout out Flatbush and Atlantic.
Yes,
but,
sir.
Yeah, Sean Marks, he's just really he's on another level. And like you mentioned earlier, when in either losses or wins, when other coaches were giving love, I know there was a point in the season when I think they played Golden State, and Steve Kerr talked a lot about him post game. He's doing some really good stuff, and I know a lot of people do have issues with his rotations and stuff like that, but he doesn't do stuff for no reason. A lot of these guys, as we touched on at the very beginning, D'Lo did miss some time with injury. Karis LeVert and Rondé missed some time with injury. So he's very strict in his minutes and is very strict for a reason. And it's not just because of, I got to do this. He's very in tune with the performance staff. And so when they say, well, X player can't go more than X amount of minutes per game or else we're going to start seeing some problems, he follows that to a T. He really trusts the people around him too. So I think that's also a big reason why some of his rotations were criticized. He was dealing with didn't want to re-injure D'Lo. He didn't want to do anything to further injure Karis or Rondé. So it's not like he's just out there being like, oh, D'Lo's hot, I got to pull him as a lesson.
Exactly. I think that's spot on. I think that's something that, Nets fans and Nets Twitters miss is the correlation between the performance team. They do their research. They're all about it. I think there was articles about the Nets staff telling the players how to sleep certain ways or, their diet and things along those lines. So they're all about the details. And I think that was really big. I think another highlight would be D'Angelo early in the season. He showed flashes of that all-star potential. And then I got to shout out my boy Karras showing off the playmaking last year. But on a negative note, what would be a disappointment of last season?
For me, the biggest disappointment were the injuries. I mean,
Yeah.
Lynn lasted, a game. I mean, he got injured in late in the fourth quarter of a tight
43rd
game.
minute of a game, yeah.
Oh, I mean, that was just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
D'Lo, like we keep talking about, missed this, a significant chunk of the season. It was kind of at a really inopportune time because he was really starting to get some good momentum going in his game and really feeling confident. And then both Rondé and Karras missing the 10-plus games in February, right when things were starting to turn around and they were starting to make a push. I mean, that was times in the season when more momentum was in the favor of the Nets, and just kind of, for whatever, it just kind of dissipated. I mean, on the other hand, though, the Lynn injury could be viewed as kind of a good thing because it kind of ended the Lynn era in Brooklyn, and it made the team move on from someone that was, I think, going to always be injured, unfortunately, from here on out.
Yeah, I agree with the injuries being the number one thing, Nick. To me, I agree somewhat with the Lynn thing, but for me, he brought so much to the franchise.
Oh, no
even
question.
And the fact that he couldn't realize that, I spoke about it on the Buzz in an episode with Nick. It was disappointing to sort of see him get traded. There's elements of relief, like you were sort of saying. It's like, okay, well, now we can sort of focus. It's the D'Lo era. It's Karras. We're bringing all these young guys. Let's bring up from there. But the fact that, we sort of he was almost the face of the franchise to start things. We gave him that 3-year, $36 million contract, which, in hindsight might have been wrong, but, we got off it. But the fact that he couldn't realize that potential, he put in so much. He put in so much work. He was a heart and soul guy in many ways. So for me, that was disappointing. That the fact that he had a good game alongside D'Lo in that first game as well. So that was sort of exciting to see what they could sort of bring to each other. Would we have seen the amount of growth from Karras? Maybe not. But for me, outside, Nick touched on it earlier, the refereeing in the last 2 minutes. And I'll shout out the 538 article by Chris Herring. 28 bad calls the Knicks got, 2 more than the Dallas Mavericks in those last sort of 2 minutes and such. We could have easily had an extra 5 wins in that sort of stage. So for me, that was because 5 wins changes everything, from a 28 to a 30, past that sort of, that magical mark of a 30-win team. Obviously we might not have got the same pick and all these sort of little different things. But for me, that was the huge disappointment. And the fact that it doesn't relate to our Nets, like a squad specifically, I think speaks volumes.
Yeah, definitely disappointing. And that always happens when you're kind of a bad team trying to become good. You don't really get the respect, especially for the young guys. But talking about the injuries, yeah, that was a big disappointment. And I think Jeremy Lin being injured and seeing that clip of him grabbing his knee is probably one of the saddest things I saw all of NBA season last year.
Yeah.
Oh, no question.
Yeah, you could just see it in his eyes. And that was just so, and you know how hard he works in dealing with injuries and a lot of his career. But for me, I think a big disappointment. I wasn't super high in the guy, but I thought he would do a little bit more when the Nets acquired him, and that was Jahlil Okafor. I felt like he would kind of rebound with the Nets and turn into a role player, but it didn't really work out at all.
I remember when they first traded for him and everything. I was like, oh boy, Ja, I'm not setting the expectations too high, but oh boy, what if he could realize his potential? And every single Philadelphia writer that I know and respect, and everyone's just like, hey man, like it's not going to happen. So don't get your hopes up. Like it's not like it didn't work out here. I mean, he's tried to spin the narrative that they just didn't use me, but I mean, it's 90% chance not going to work out.
Yeah, and you talk about the Sixers guys. I feel like I'm them now talking to my Pelican guys and letting them know like it's not going to work, guys. Like
I don't know.
Yeah, he's just not self-aware. And Jack and I talked about this a little bit. Is like, if you're not getting minutes, you can go in and do the dirty work. Try hard on defense, bring the energy, go in on the board, set good screens. And they're just things he didn't really want to do. So that was kind of disappointing. It's not like I was super high on him, but just enough that I was like,
Another disappointment.
Source Castillo, as if that wasn't a disappointment as well.
I was just going to say that.
Great minds think alike. But do you guys remember that performance against the Raptors? And I was high on the dude. Like I remember doing like a buzz after it. Yeah, it was like, was it his first game or was it his like second game with the team?
It was definitely
one of those.
Second.
Yeah, the fact that like he just jacked him up. I'm like, wow, we might get something out of this. But then now we dealt into Portland, and he's Portland's problem now, I guess.
And that's like another thing. And Portland guys are like, oh, maybe we can get something out of, like, talk about a guy having a better nickname than his actual play in the court. Like, that was definitely something like Stauskas. But moving on from last season, talking about this year, we're going to look at the ranking from the OTG staff, and they voted the Nets at number 25. Now, do you think this ranking's fair, too high, too low? What are your thoughts?
I think it's too low. I mean, is it too low? No. I mean, no one really knows exactly how the Nets are going to do this year. There are a lot of people since the first year that this is the Nets can control their own destiny through the draft. There's a lot of people saying, well, we got to lose for Zion. We got to lose for RJ. And I don't think we're going to do that. I don't want them to do that. So I think it's a little low, but maybe not too far off.
Yeah, if you're looking at the numbers, where the OTG writers had sort of other teams around that range, Suns, Cavs, Hornets, Mavs, Bulls just under, even the Grizzlies at 20. So you think the Nets are sort of around that 20 to 25 range. The fact that they're on the lowest scale, yeah, I guess it depends on the biases of specific writers, and maybe it was the fact that I put out a piece might have angered a couple of Knicks fans, but obviously we did these votes a little bit earlier. But I think that the Nets are in that 20 to 25 range, maybe a little low, but I think it's fair-ish.
Yeah.
I'll say it's a little low. I would put them closer to 20 than I would to 25. I think they're more in the high, like the lower 20s, I guess I would say, just because of player development, all the depth they've had, the bad luck they had last season. And I just think, people are assuming that they're going to tank because they have their pick, but everything we've heard from Kenny and Sean looks like they're trying to be competitive, set that culture, and they're more so looking to take a swing in free agency next year than take a swing at tanking and getting a high pick.
Yeah, I'll probably have us like 23-ish, like around that sort of range, maybe 22. But, obviously all the words coming out of like we were sort of saying about there's no tanking is going to be happening. That could change obviously with injuries and what happens at the sort of trade deadline and such, and with guys like D'Lo if he shows enough. But yeah, I think it's a little bit low.
I feel a lot more confident this year dealing with injuries than I did last season. I feel like there's actually some depth where they can bring in a solid guy. They don't have to play somebody's on a two-way contract or a G League call-up. So that kind of gives me some confidence in them being a little bit higher. But obviously, it's really tough to predict the NBA with all these teams, and we don't really know which teams are going to tank this season.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the Nets are not going to tank. You could argue for the fact, the Cavs certainly aren't going to tank because what they've done with Kevin Love and, Rodney Hood's still, out there. I guess I'm assuming they'll re-sign him. The Hornets don't look like they'll be tanking, despite the fact that the Kemba rumors persist. The Mavs look like they're going to be going for it. The Grizzlies as well. So if you look at the teams around that sort of range, the Nets are in there. The fact that it will be pushing for possible playoff contention, as has been, sort of put out there, not by just, us Nets guys, but, people outside of the Nets sphere, I think shows that, we can push, that 20 range, maybe even the top half range.
Agreed. Moving on from there, looking at additions from this offseason, we'll start with the draft. Number 29 overall, the Nets selected Jana Musa, obviously versatile offensive player, offensive-minded, a lot of experience playing internationally. Defense is a question. What were your thoughts on this pick?
I've been really high on Musa for a long time. I remember first watching him back when I was with this. It was the D League at the time. That's how long ago it was. A site called Ridiculous Upside. I was tasked with scouting him at FIBA U17s back in 2016, and I was just so blown away by him. I mean, the tenacity, the scoring talents. I mean, he was dicing everyone up. I mean, it was insane. And I mean, in addition to that, I mean, he's been playing at a really high level for a long time, and it's not like he's been playing AAU or he's been playing at mid-major school. I mean, he's been playing against like professionals. He's been like a professional since he's been 17 years old, which is something that I think is really invaluable in this process. And another thing I really like about him is he is through the roof about being in Brooklyn. I mean, all of those guys since I mean, they just love the idea of being in Brooklyn because of Drazen Petrovic. And I mean, when he got drafted, I mean, it was like he got picked first overall. He was just thrilled. And so I think that's really going to serve him. Attitude's going to serve him really well in Brooklyn too.
Absolutely. I think fit should not be underestimated when you're drafted. You look at guys like Kawhi Leonard, all these sort of guys. If they weren't picked, Donovan Mitchell, if they weren't picked by the right team, then, their development probably doesn't go the way that we see right now. I think the same will happen with Janan. Offensively, Nick puts out a heap of video, guys. Some of his moments are absolutely insane. If you're not following him on Twitter, What's your Twitter handle at? Is it at Nick underscore IT?
Nick underscore LT.
LT, my bad.
No
My
worries.
bad. But definite must follow. He's informed me on terms of some of the Nets sort of guys that we got that we'll sort of talk about in terms of our additions. But on Janan, his offensive game is just something that's very unique, and I think he can bring something to this Nets squad. Whether he can crack the rotation early on, I think the fact that we've got so much depth now, he could see some minutes in spurts. But he's obviously the fact that he's all in on what the Brooklyn are creating. Him and Rodions. I love the sort of friendship that they have, and I think that to be able to bounce off each other, I think that's going to be awesome for them, and their development. Whether they're grinding away in the G League or whether they're seeing some minutes or getting some leadership or watching some film, I think that having those two together as they sort of build going forward, and the long-term contract for Rodions, and Janan signed for his rookie contract as well. So I think it's going to be really awesome to see, and he's got the Mamba mentality, as he likes to say as well.
What do you guys think the Nets can expect from him this season?
I would be really shocked if he went to the G League. I mean, the biggest reason why he slid all the way down to us is because he kind of put it out there that he's not going to be stashed anywhere. So I don't think he's going to be stashed in Long Island either. I think he's going to kind of surprise us like Jared Allen did. Jared Allen, kind of at the beginning of the year, he didn't get in too much. I think he only appeared in 72 games or something like that. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the same thing from Musa, and even I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the same kind of breakout.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised either. The only thing is, last year, the reason why we saw so much from Jared Allen is because Tyler Zeller and Timofey Mozgov aren't that hard of guys to sort of usurp in the rotation.
Yeah.
Whereas I think we have the sort of depth now, whether it's guys like Trevion Graham, Dudley, Karis LeVert. Obviously, the versatility for Janan works well. I think he still has quite a slight frame, but his speed is good, his finishing is good, his scoring ability is good. So I think he has a role. It's just about what Coach Kenny sees that in his system. I certainly do think he does have it, but I'm not saying that the G League he's going to spend the majority of his time there, but I don't like the way the whole G League system is thought as being like, you just throw a guy back there and it's like, it's NBA purgatory. I like the fact that, if you can build up some confidence there, come back, maybe if it's just 1 or 2 games, I don't see why it's such a bad fit. I think the way it's been used for guys that have sort of rehab injury, guys like Tony Parker more recently, that's sort of the model that it's been taken. But I think it should be used as a model to also improve, rookies. I think going into the future, and it's a whole nother conversation, but, if the G League is brought up as a system for young, unproven guys, it can really increase the exposure. And I think as well, increase the sort of talent level as well for guys going into the league looking to develop. But yeah, I think Janan does have a role.
Yeah. What would you guys say is best and worst case scenario for Janan for his entire career? Like if, when he hits his peak or if he were to, hit his floor?
That's tough to measure right now. We haven't seen him play an NBA game. We didn't even get to see him in summer league because of contract issues, but we probably wouldn't have seen him anyways because he just got done playing 77 games overseas, like just before the draft. But I think his peak is going to be very, very good, like starting caliber player in the NBA. I mean, who knows? He might surprise all of us. He might be even like a fringe all-star on floor. I think he's going to be a decent rotation guy, like in the 8-man rotation for sure. But he's definitely going to be an NBA player. He's not going to be someone that's in the league for his rookie contract and then kind of washes out.
Yeah, I agree. I think, his floor might be poor man's Jamal Crawford in terms of the fact that, just a really sort of nice spark plug off the bench can give you something. And I think his sort of ceiling could be, maybe fringe all-star. I think, it's I like sort of Nick was saying, it's hard to project because we haven't seen him at NBA level, but I think seeing him at Euro level and, the fact that he's proven at a high rate in a high level league, speaks volumes, but it is very hard to project at this stage. I think if you ask that question in a little bit, Nick, I think after maybe 5 or 10 games, it'd be a lot easier to sort of answer the question.
Agreed.
I think that's fair. Yeah, obviously, it's always hard to put a cap on somebody, especially this young, and they can still grow a little bit. And putting on size is going to be important. How concerned should we be about his defense?
I wouldn't be too concerned. I mean, he has I don't know if you guys have watched a lot of film of him, but he has a very abnormal posture. Kind of like hunches over, gets on like Quasimodo-esque. I think once he kind of figures out to not do that, he's going to be fine. He's very tenacious. He has a huge attitude, which is going to really serve him on defense. And I think again, if it's going to be the difference of him having a spot in the rotation and not having a spot in the rotation, he's going to buckle down and really try hard on defense.
Yeah, I think he's talked about that at some of his presses into the media, and I think he seems like a very coachable player, and like the mentality and the attitude, like you mentioned, Nick, is going to be the number one thing. And he might not be an elite defender, but we don't have neither does D'Angelo Russell right now. I think he has the mentality, and I think attitude is everything. I've sort of mentioned that. I think in terms of NBA defense, attitude is probably the number one thing, and then comes your defensive capabilities. I think, obviously being an elite defender, I don't think that that's in his horizon at all, but I think he's going to be capable enough that he's not going to be a sieve on the floor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you said, Jack, energy and effort are some of the biggest things when it comes to defense. Moving on to the other draft pick, 40th overall, Rodions Kurocs, very raw, didn't get to play a ton last year internationally. What were your thoughts on him?
I was pretty high on him too. I know last year he was one of the final people to drop out, and I was already in love with him then. So it's really awesome that we got him in this year's draft. I know he kind of was in bad graces with his coach overseas because he was obviously going to head to the NBA and everything and trying hard to head to the NBA. And that kind of was a bit of a friction point, or at least I'm pretty sure I read that somewhere. So he's pretty raw, but the film I've seen of him, he has a lot of really good skills. He's very slight, unfortunately. He needs to add some good NBA weight to his body. But I mean, he's very skilled. He's really gets out in transition. He can finish above the rim. He has a really pretty looking jump shot. He could eventually maybe grow into the stretch four that Brooklyn's been missing.
Yeah, I think his fit in the Nets system is almost perfect if he does realize that potential. I remember watching video of him as well, a couple of YouTube videos of him being scouted by Sean Marks. I think it was in LA, I believe, and I think Lonnie Walker was there as well, the Spurs pick as well. So it was nice to see him sort of dueling with a guy who went so high in the draft. And I think Rodions has that potential, that sort of versatile skill set offensively. And I think, potential to be a stretch four that the Nets have always needed is always a nice thing. And I think he's going to be given that opportunity going over the season. But, right now, he's got a lot of things to improve on. I think his body, and I think Jardin to an extent as well. But, at the same time, Brandon Ingram and Kevin Durant haven't put on 10 pounds, sorry. Australian vernacular coming in there. And they've still been capable NBA players. So I think it's more about strength, I guess, than mass, as is the case with, a lot of our guys, because we saw in defense, guys are sort of being blown past because of that lack of sort of mass and strength and such. So I think, if both those guys can put on strength, then I think it's going to do them wonders.
Yeah, for sure. And to touch on what Nick said, I remember seeing him the previous year as being a late first-round pick. Somebody that people were kind of excited for. So getting him with a 40th overall pick and then the potential there, and like you said, Jack, the relationship between these two rookies should help these two guys. Do you think that Rodions is going to spend a good amount of time in the G League, or he's going to be with the NBA team?
I think that is going to be someone that spends a lot of time with the G League. One of the benefits of the G League, and we saw it time and time again, I know Jack kind of touched on this, but Terry Rozier was with the Maine Red Claws he's been with a Red Claw for more than a Celtic in his career because they've taken advantage of the send him up for practice, send him to a couple games, and call him right back. And the Celtics, I almost hate to say this, they've kind of really cornered the market on how to really use the G League to develop guys. So I think having Long Island so close to Brooklyn, I think they're going to practice him with the Nets, then send him off to Long Island, have him practice with those Nets, and maybe play in a game or two, send him back. And he's definitely going to be a guy that spends more time on the Brooklyn bench than on the floor. But I could definitely see him spending a good portion of the time splitting his time between Long Island and Brooklyn.
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think the insight you gave there, Nick, was wonderful. The fact that if Brooklyn if the Nets franchise as a whole can develop a synergy with their G League franchise, and I think if I'm mistaken, I think it's an Australian coach who is the Long Island Nets coach right now. So I think, if Sean Marks can develop that relationship, Coach Kenny can develop that relationship, I think Rodions is going to be a sort of big sort of piece going forward. And, if we can see anywhere near the sort of capabilities of what Terry Rozier's shown as a starter, proven starter, and, probably one of the premier backup point guards, for Rodions to be sort of that sort of capability, I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the fact that Nick brought it up is the fact that Long Island and Brooklyn are so close. I believe it's like a 45-minute train ride. That's
Yeah.
really easy to send guys back and forth. They can come play in Long Island, go back for the NBA game later on the night, sit on the bench, get what they need to do. But moving on from the draft picks, looking at the trade acquisitions, Kenneth Faried, he came with a first-round pick, has the potential to bounce back, brings energy. He can be a rebounding monster. What are your thoughts on bringing Faried to Brooklyn?
I'm a really big fan of Faried. I know the very first writing job I ever had was with the Denver Nuggets fan-sided site like 5-6 years ago, and Faried back then, I mean, he was like the monster. He was the player everyone wanted. They signed with a huge extension. I mean, I'm pretty high on him. I think he has kind of gone by the wayside a little bit in Denver. It went from being, this is Kenneth Faried's team to, oh, we got Yusuf Nurkic. We're going to try to make that work, and it didn't work. And then they got Jokic, and they were like, well, let's try to make Nurk and Joke work, and that didn't work either. And so they've kind of been trying to make different things work, and along the way, players have been forgotten. And Kenneth Faried is the ultimate in that. I mean, he had such a huge contract that they couldn't really move him, so they just had to kind of sit him. And he's definitely better than his numbers suggested last year. He's got a high motor. He's super strong, super athletic, an incredible rebounder. And I think he could maybe, under Kenny, start to get a little bit of a jumper going. I mean, is it going to be the same kind of thing that we saw with Brook Lopez in Kenny's first year? Probably not. Is it going to be similar to what we saw with other players that have worked with Kenny? Maybe not. But it's going to be a place where he can kind of revitalize himself a little bit, maybe teach him a new few tricks. And he's automatically an upgrade over who Brooklyn would have had in the rotation last year in Timofey Mozgov or Jahlil Okafor.
Quincy Acey. Yeah, I think, the thing about the jumper is I remember seeing a video of him, just scrimmaging around, and there was video on Twitter. The form looked nice. And I think that's one of the number one things. Like you look at, Joakim Noah, Tristan Thompson, these guys taking jumpers, they look, it's a trash form, and there's no way that Ty Lue and David Fizdale are going to allow him to do it. Whereas I think Coach Kenny is going to give everyone the reins to do it, within reason, obviously. And I think, all the things you mentioned there, I don't need to add to it all, Nick, but, offensive rebounding, I think is going to be one huge thing that he's going to provide. And, whether that's with the first or the second unit, we're going to get some extra looks, and that's going to work wonders for guys like Alan Crabb, Joe Harris, even D'Lo and Karras. I think he's going to provide a real energy, a real presence. The Manimal in Brooklyn is going to be fun to see.
And he's another guy that seems like he's really excited to be in Brooklyn, obviously being from New Jersey, close by. And I'm excited to see him in transition, throw down some big dunks, bring that energy off the bench. I talked a little bit to some Denver guys about it. They said not to get too high on him, but I'm pretty high on Kenny and what he can do with players. So hopefully he can kind of help him bounce back. It is a contract year for him too. So Kenneth is going to look to bring it this year in Brooklyn.
I think another thing that's going to be really key with him is he's going to accept a role. It's not like he's going to walk in and be like, well, I'm paid X amount of money. I should be the starting four. I should be this. I should play X amount of minutes. Like that's just not going to happen. I mean, he played like 15 minutes or something last year in Denver. So I think to have him come in and just play hard for the 15, 20 minutes, for 23 minutes, or whatever it is going to be a night, that's going to be really valuable. I mean, there really wasn't a player like him on the roster last year. I mean, we have Jarrett can dunk over anyone, but he's not that quick, and he's definitely, I mean, he has the frame of a broomstick right now. I mean, we have Rondé, but Rondé does so much that, I mean, he's not always going to be the guy running out in transition and dunking over everyone. I mean, Kenneth Faried is going to be deadly in transition. I think he's really, I mean, you get him out moving, you have guys like D'Lo and Dinwiddie that can pass, Karras can pass. I mean, he's an incredible passer too. So I think that this is just going to be a guy that really, he comes in, plays super hard, gets all the rebounds, gets some buckets in transition, and hits back to the bench.
And I believe at his press conference, he mentioned he wanted to come in here and earn a role. So
Yeah.
he knows that he needs to put in the work and kind of earn this. And it kind of fills a need too, like you mentioned, Nick, the toughness, the rebounding that this team lacked last year. Now they have him and Ed Davis, who we'll talk about a little bit later. It's kind of exciting to kind of fill in that need. But another guy they acquired via trade, Jared Dudley, something to prove, known as a 3-point shooter, can bring some leadership on and off the court. What are your thoughts on bringing in Dudley?
I'm a fan of Dudley. I know no one on Nets Twitter was a fan of him because of what he tweeted in the past. I think during the original Dwight Mayer and everything.
Which I thought was kind of fair, to be honest. I didn't think it was that big a deal.
I mean, that wasn't bad. I mean, and again, that was so long ago. So I like him. Again, people are like, well, he's not going to be the stretch four Brooklyn needs. I mean, no kidding. I mean, he's an old guy. He's in the swan song of his career. But he's going to be valuable. I think he's going to be a better shooter than AC was. And again, Kenny's not going to ask him to play 32 minutes a game. He's going to be another guy that's like between 18 and 23 minutes max. So I think really small sample size, really valuable. It's going to be one of the guys that instead of watching someone go down and brick a three or someone go down and take a bad shot, he's going to be the guy to kind of balance things. He's going to be like the veteran leadership when DeMarre Carroll, goes off the floor. Like, it's going to be a guy that you can go in, you can trust, and it's going to settle guys down.
Yeah, and I don't think you can underestimate the leadership presence that provides. DeMarre was huge with that. And I think adding in another guy in Jared Dudley who, is outspoken in ways, but is outspoken and articulate in many ways as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, his prior relationship with Devin Booker, I would say that, both of them had a really great relationship. They speak volumes of each other. I think, he can bring something to there with D'Lo as well. And to a lot of other guys, we spoke about, Jana and Rodions. Jared Dudley he's been around the league for a long time, over a decade. I've seen him, a couple of years ago when he was on the Washington Wizards. I've seen him have, nights out where he's, nailed 3 or 4 threes. And I've seen that in person, so he can do it. It's not I don't think he was probably given. It's not that he deserves the opportunity, but I think he's going to be given enough minutes to show something. And he has said, that he is in game shape. He didn't want to be bought out, so I think he's saying all the right things. And I think, he's going to prove that, at training camp. And I think as a leader, it's definitely a worthwhile flyer as well.
And he's another guy who said he wanted to come play for Kenny, and he was excited to come to Brooklyn, so that's nice. He didn't want to be bought out. And I think there is some potential there, like you guys said, replacement over Quincy AC. It's not really hard to be better than he was last year. He did have some good moments. I don't want to throw complete shade at AC, but having a good 3-point shooter, I believe active-wise, he's one of the best in the league. So I'm kind of excited what he can do. I also like the comment he had about D'Angelo, saying it's going to be D'Angelo's best season this year. So I think Dudley's going to be nothing but positive for the Nets.
Yeah, and another thing that should go unnoticed is during the same year that Jeremy Lin signed with us, Dudley came, apparently, according to him, so close to signing with Brooklyn then, but he decided to go back to Phoenix and go place where he's been familiar with and whatnot. Yeah. But, it's not like he doesn't want to be here either. I mean, he came so close to signing as a free agent here a few years ago.
Yeah, I actually recall that, and I was kind of looking forward to him because I just like the 3-point shooting he could bring, and he was kind of moving to the 4 at that time in his career. And just, having some actual respect for Brooklyn is cool, anybody who kind of does that. And like we said before, the comments when he made when Billy King were the GM, they were kind of fair because I think we'd all agree that we weren't too happy with the job that King did. But moving on to free agent acquisitions. First up, Ed Davis, 1 year, $4.4 million. Like I said before, fills that need of toughness, rebounding, leadership. Some people pegged him as, the best backup center in the league last year or one of the top 3 or 4 players on Portland. What were your thoughts on picking up Ed Davis on a 1-year deal?
I'm through the roof on it. I mean, really, all of these deals are very smart. They don't eat into any future money whatsoever, which is, again, very smart. And Davis is going to be great. He's going to be able to teach Jared Allen some tricks of the trade. A lot of times last year, we saw Jarrett kind of boxed out by more veteran players and whatnot. So I think Davis is going to be able to kind of teach him how to be like an effective center and use his body better, which is always going to help. But I'm just strictly going for what Davis offers on the court. Excellent rebounder. He's actually not bad scoring in the pick and roll. I mean, I know that's not like the main thing that you should take away from him or expect him to go out there and get a double-double, but it's going to be a guy that when the starters come off the floor, they're not going to be lost for offense. They're not going to be lost for a guy knowing what's going on the court, which is going to be just so valuable. Because last year, when Jarrett wasn't on the floor, I mean, who was? I mean, it was like Quincy AC playing the stretch 5 role. And so to have Ed Davis there is going to be really, really nice. I mean, he's shown some decent passing ability, I mean, and again, the rebounding is it's going to be so huge. So that was probably Brooklyn's biggest Achilles heel outside of like general defense.
Yeah, and your moment on that one that you put on Twitter as well, Nick, was awesome in that sense. I think one of the big takeaways that I'm going to put it, he's the best backup center, the best rebounding backup center in the league. The stats prove that, and to be, I think body contortioning, all the sort of like little things that you sort of alluded to as well. I think he has all those as a teammate as well. To see the fact that CJ and Dame were so upset about his departure, same with the Blazers fans, I think is only going to speak volumes. And the fact that he's also bought in, in his presser with the Nets, he's excited to have a big season ahead. I think him and Jared Allen are going to be a great 1-2 punch at the 5. I think rebounding is going to be a real sort of weapon for us now with guys like him and Kenneth Faried. I think it can sort of change in ways, add things to our system that we didn't have last year.
And anytime you have a team that shoots a ton of threes, it's always great to have some good rebounders because we know 3 balls, the rebounds can go any type of way. And like Nick mentioned, when you play against a guy like a Dwight Howard or a Joel Embiid where Jared Allen's kind of getting muscled, you can bring someone in a little bit tougher like Ed Davis and kind of ease the load for Allen. But moving on from Ed Davis, Shabazz Napier, 2-year deal, $4 million and change. I don't know the exact details on that one. Brings some nice guard depth, shown ability to play on and off ball. And Kenny mentioned in his press conference about him that he was a guy they considered an X factor for Portland. So what were your thoughts on Napier coming to Brooklyn?
Again, someone else I was really, really excited that they got. I'm a little bit of a frustrated Blazers fan. I have a Greg Oden jersey. I'm not going to lie.
That's a classic, man.
So I've always kind of had a ear to the ground about the Blazers and always been kind of tuned into what they're doing. And Napier, I mean, I agree. He was sort of an X factor for them. He's someone that, again, buys into a role. He doesn't try to do too much. And he's very effective. He's a very good 3-point shooter. He's a pretty good passer. You can put him on ball or off ball. I think it's going to be a guy that if you want to run D'Lo and Napier late in the game or throughout the game, you can. If you want to run Dinwiddie, Napier, you can do that. If you want to run Napier, LeVert, I mean, it's just there's going to be so many possibilities with him. You're not going to see any drop off. You're not going to see guys playing out of position so much. You'd more try to make rotations work. So he's going to be a great kind of like rotation guard, 3rd point guard, really good. And again, he's someone that is bought into not only a role but into being in Brooklyn and into this system.
Yeah, I think he's going to be perfect for it. The perfect complementary guard. If we look at sort of Jeremy Lin and what we wanted him to sort of be, obviously I think Shabazz Napier is going to be. I think he could probably almost see as many minutes as some of our other guards because I think he has so much versatility. I put out a tweet the other day that he was 4th in catch and shoot percentage, at 46% for backup guards who played more than 40 games as a reserve. Along the likes of Buddy Hield, Raul Neto, and Thomas Satoransky. I think he's shooting. I think he shot almost 39% as well from the perimeter. One area where we sort of really lacked, and now we've sort of added to it. With Dudley, as Travion Graham, who we'll get to as well. I think it's something that is only going to increase. Our effectiveness in this 3-and-D sort of run and gun system.
Who do you guys think is going to work best with Napier as like his backcourt mate? Which guy do you think is going to be the best combo? Obviously, we have never seen them play together, but if you had a guess out of Dinwiddie, D'Lo, and LeVert, who do you think will pair best with Napier?
I think LeVert, because you'll have 2 guys that are really good at passing. You'll have LeVert kind of his more natural position of being a 2, and it'll allow LeVert to play off cuts more, to play off screens for 3-point shots, and at the same time, you're not really sacrificing anything by having LeVert on the floor. You can run off-ball plays for Napier as well. You have all the passing ability. So I think that's going to be a good kind of backup backcourt.
Yeah, I would agree. And just saying, Shabazz is a little bit smaller as a guard, and I know D'Lo and Caris, are taller in senses, but I think Caris also has way more defensive capabilities than D'Lo right now. So I think that sort of works well in terms of it's sort of the 1-2 punch in that backcourt. But D'Lo and Shabazz, you sort of alluded to it slightly as well, Nick. If D'Lo's having a big night, Shabazz is that perfect sort of complementary piece. We all want it to be D'Lo and Caris, but I think Shabazz is going to slot in wherever you need him. We saw plenty of 3-guard lineups in Portland last season as well. So it's not to say that, you couldn't have all 3 at once. And I think that's something really exciting to see. To sort of have that depth in terms of talent now is going to be something that Coach Kenny is going to have used as a weapon.
Yeah, his versatility to play on or off ball, I think, is going to be something that can really benefit the team and the coaching staff. And like you said, Jack, having 3 guard lineups is just a ton of fun. I know we talked about possibly before last season, Jeremy Lin, D'Angelo, and some of the other guys getting together, but obviously it never happened. Moving on from Shabazz, though, Trevion Graham, 2 years, 3 years and $3 million change. Not sure about the details on that one, but second year is not guaranteed. 3-and-D potential, toughness, position versatility, can play 2 through 4. What are your thoughts on bringing Graham to Brooklyn?
I was a fan of him. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I was like, oh, Travion Graham. I don't know who exactly that is. I had to do a little research, but when I figured out who he was and watched the film, I kind of started in liking the signing again. Not guaranteed for the second year, so if he comes in and doesn't play too well or doesn't fit, it's not that big a deal. It's not going to impact 2019 free agency whatsoever. But he definitely has 3-and-D potential. He played like a decent role with Charlotte last year. He showed some flashes. He, again, a guy that knows how to play a role, buys into playing a role. He doesn't go out and take crazy wild shots. He's not out there looking to score whenever he touches the ball, which is, I think, pretty valuable in a system like Kenny Atkinson's. But he's someone that on defense can really guard 2 through 4 pretty easily. He's got super long arms, and I don't know. We'll see what Kenny can turn him into. I think that's kind of the little bit of a gamble free agent. It's kind of like the guy that come in, you're not sure what he's going to get, but it could be a low risk, high reward type move.
Yeah, I was shocked to see no other teams really go after him. The fact that, the Houston Rockets needed a wing like no other, and they ended up signing Carmelo Anthony more recently, James Ennis as well. The 3-and-D wing is the sort of prototype that every team, wants these days. A guy who can sort of guard multiple positions, 1 through 4. He is undersized somewhat, 6'4", 6'5", but he has, the wingspan. He has the sort of IQ to be able to defend multiple positions. A very capable 3-point shooter. He didn't take a heap of them. I think a little bit under 2 last year. But if he can take a couple more and still hover around that 38 to 40% mark, I'd be more than happy. So I think he was a worthwhile flyer because as well, he's got youth on his side. He's barely 25 yet. So he's still got plenty of his career ahead of him. And, if he doesn't work out, it's definitely not anything that's going to ruin the Nets franchise in any sense of the word.
Yeah, and talking to two Charlotte guys, Evan Dial and Dylan Jackson, they both were really high on him, and they said it's somebody that Nets fans are really going to love just because of the way he plays, the toughness and the energy he brings. And like you guys said, not much of a risk, and it really could work out like a huge positive if next year they were to sign some big guys. Now they have Trevion Graham on a small deal, and he can be that role player that kind of complements some other players. So I was pretty happy about the signing myself. But moving on to Jack's favorite signing, and that's re-signing Joe Harris, 2 years, $16 million. The Brooklyn guy who's kind of been that culture setter, improved a lot last year, and Sean did a great job front-loading the deal. So this year is more than the following year. So what are your thoughts on bringing back Joe Harris?
Oh my gosh, I was through the roof. I mean, it was one of those deals where you knew it was going to happen, and then when it finally happened, you just kind of exhaled. Again, really, really great thing that they front-loaded the deal. Really happy he's sticking around and not going to go bolster Golden State's bench or go to Houston or something like that. I mean, that would just break my heart. But I'm really high on Joe Harris. I mean, again, like Jack talks about, number 1 at finishing at the rim. He was the best 3-point shooter in the league after the All-Star game. I mean, he's someone that is really good. And honestly, we could see his 3-point percentage go even higher, probably. Like, we could see him move up into like the upper 40s, maybe even lower 50s. You never know. I mean, he is someone that has improved every single year. And I remember I back when I was with this D-League site, I did a little interview with him about when he was on the Canton Charge. So, I mean, it's been so fun to watch him grow from being a guy that was making the Canton Charge roster to being the guy, the kind of fulcrum for this Brooklyn offense, this 3-point shooting attack.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the fact we got in front of the Max is an absolute steal for the Nets. But yeah, I'm obviously as high as you can get on Joe Harris. Some videos I was watching in the off season of him. He did a video with NBA UK. Funnily enough, when I wasn't in London, so I couldn't stalk him. So that was a shame for me. But he was showing the little things that he does on defense and offense. He's shooting, and I think he's the perfect guy for the modern league right now, and a perfect guy for a modern system like Coach Kenny's. I think, he can hover around that 40% range, but like you mentioned, Nick, I think he can get into that upper echelon of the sort of Kyle Korver, JJ Redick territory And if you have a guy like him and Alan Crabb gets back to his sort of, form, then you have two real weapons, two of the probably better shooters, in the league right now. Alan Crabb, when he was with Portland, was probably one of the best ones. And if you have both of them in lineups, for me, it's just absolutely tantalizing. And I know Nick loves shooting more than any other. And I know everyone else who's heard me speak on a podcast before, I love Joe Harris more than any other as well.
Yeah, I know you're probably a little jealous that Nick mentioned you got to interview him. So
yeah, a little bit, but we'll move on. We'll move on.
I do like another thing about Harris. Even occasionally when his 3-point shot isn't falling, you still kind of know what you're going to get with him. He's going to drive to the rim. He's going to bring the energy. He's not going to be an elite defender, but he's going to put effort in on that side of the floor. And the fact that he works so hard and he just says all the right things, he's a guy. I think D'Angelo mentioned him as just like a true professional kind of guy that just sets the tone. He does everything. He works hard. So no complaints about me bringing back Joe Harris. Moving on to departures, though, we're going to talk about the guys they trade away. We'll start with Isaiah Whitehead. What were your thoughts on getting rid of Whitehead, sending him to Denver, who was then cut?
I was a little sad about this. I know Whitehead is a guy that I really enjoyed watching. My first season really covering the Nets for real was his first season too, and the way he kind of was out of the frying pan into the fire when all the injuries happened and Jeremy Lin went down for the first time. He was asked to do a lot, and I think it kind of hindered his development. So I was happy last season that he could go to Long Island and just dominate and really get some confidence. He had some good moments with the Nets. So I really thought this year was going to be like the Isaiah Whitehead breakout year, that he would be the third guard, the kind of Shabazz Napier role that's now his. But it was unfortunate. I mean, I totally understand why it had to happen. It makes sense why it had to happen. It led to good things happening for the Nets, but I know that he was the guy that was really, really happy to be in Brooklyn. I mean, that was huge to him, and he did so much for the community, and he's a local guy. So it's always sad to see something like that happen. But I hate to say it's a business, but it is a business, and I know that he's going to do well. I think he just signed a deal over with a team in Russia or a team overseas. So I hope he gets back in the NBA soon. But I was sad to see him go.
Yeah, it's tough to see a guy who poured his heart and soul into a franchise. He did nothing but good things for us. Whenever he was asked to sort of come in and have a role, he would do his best. Obviously, he was thrown into the fire at stages, but there were times where he's shown flashes, and I think he is an NBA caliber player. But I think hopefully he gets a little bit of money out in Europe, wherever he is now, and then he can come back, later in the season, later in his career. I think he is going to be back sooner rather than later because, a guy with his character, a guy with his capability, mentality, I think there's going to be teams that are going to be looking for him.
Yeah, like Nick said, the fact that he was from Brooklyn, he did so much for the community, it makes it a little bit sad, but it is a business, and it ended up kind of helping the Nets in a lot of different ways. Moving on to the next guy who was traded, that was Jeremy Lin. Thoughts on Lin leaving and his fans also leaving?
I on eggshells. I was kind of happy to see him go. I mean, again, it was going to be a situation where I, in my bones, believed that he just was never going to be really healthy again, and I don't think he was ever going to be the player that he was signed on to be, the player that he wants to be. And I think he's someone that would have tried to push himself to a point where he would have just re-injured himself again, or it wouldn't have worked out. And then there would have just always been the distraction. Well, what about this? What about that? I mean, his injury last year was kind of a silver lining because it did allow LeVert to kind of come out and come into his own. It really allowed Dinwiddie to show what he has too. I mean, he went from being a guy on a non-guaranteed deal this year to being someone that was the NBA skills champion and in the running for most improved player. And that, I mean, I hate to say it only happened because Lin went out, but I mean, it kind of did. So his injury, the trade was a good deal, and in no uncertain terms, I'm happy that the fans are gone too, because they were a little exhausting. I mean, I know there's a lot of people that are very passionate about him, and Jeremy Lin means a lot to a lot of people, and that's great. And Lin, don't get me wrong, is one of the nicest guys in the world. I mean, one of the most genuine guys. Everything that he says he is, all the actions that he has, he's all that and then some. But I'll be happy to have a nice, calm season finally.
the fans were still lingering, obviously, with his exhibition game with Joseph Tsai and Rondé and stuff. So,
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that was the dumbest thing. Oh my god.
what was it again? The fact that he wasn't mentioned in a tweet or something.
Yeah, the Nets account shouted out the owner and Rondé, and I think Levert was over there too, and it kind of gives like, oh, we're in a charity game in China, and everyone's just like, oh, it's so disrespectful, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And then Joe chimed in and added fuel to the fire, which I don't get why he did that. But if that's the last thing that happens this year, that's the last thing. I'll be happy that it's over.
I mean, I'm sure there'll be plenty of Nets fans watching the Atlanta Nets game for reasons unknown. But I think that I might have stolen Nick's curse. And for those that don't know, I'm sure plenty of people do. Whenever Nick buys a jersey, the player leaves. I bought a Nets jersey tee of Jeremy Lin while I was in New York last year because, he was our best player at the time. And he left. And I had a Brook Lopez one the year before. So I'm not going to be buying a D'Angelo Russell or a Karis LeVert or a Spencer Dinwiddie or any of those guys anytime soon when I plan to head over to the States. But at the same time, yeah, I think his departure means so much room for growth outside of, the sort of whole Jeremy Lin fandom. But he also did some nice things, like you mentioned, Nick. So I think there's good and bad to the Jeremy Lin experience.
Yeah, I think first when he came here as a free agent signing, he helped set the culture, did some things nicely to help the Nets be more competitive. But this trade made a lot of sense. I know a lot of people are giving Sean Marks credit being able to move the contract, $12 million a year expiring and only have to give up a second round pick that's not going to go over there for a couple of years. So I thought that was pretty positive. And like you guys mentioned, we never wish injury on anybody, but the fact he got injured allowed other guys to develop. And we didn't really have to worry about there being a problem about who's that lead guard, who's going to be that point guard this season, even this season too, because you look at it going to season, we had Spencer Dinwiddie, we had D'Angelo Russell, we had Karis LeVert, and then Jeremy Lin. Where was he going to get minutes? And we know that him and Kenny have a great relationship, so now we don't really have to worry about that. So I wish Lin the best, and maybe he can stay healthy, but it does look like it's going to be tough, especially coming off a patella tendon tear, which is a really serious injury.
No joke.
Moving on to a guy I know I personally was very happy, and Jack tried to convince me to buy his jersey so he would get traded, and that was Timothy Mozgov, and he is gone. And that was one of the most impressive moves by Sean Marks because I did not think it was possible to get rid of that contract.
I know that one was it was a little surprising, but what was even more surprising is wasn't he that flipped for again? I mean, geez, the most immovable contract was moved twice in like 5 days. So I mean, it's great and everything, and especially I think just before, like a few days before he was moved, he was kind of very negative about the Nets and his year and everything. So I mean, you hate to see something like that go down, but it was very clear. It was abundantly clear that he wasn't going to have a role in Brooklyn. He didn't fit in like they thought he would. He wasn't the guy that could come in and bolster the bench. I mean, Jared Allen kind of came in and really took his job too. So I think it was just an all around good move. Get his contract off the books, really free up 2019, which is I don't think something people were really expecting. I mean, the cap space was going to be there for 2019, but now it's 2 max slots, which is huge. I mean, that's worth getting almost any player off the books.
Yeah, and I think I've been rereading a little bit of Harry Potter lately, and one of the key lines, one of the most iconic lines from the movies as well, from the first one, Hagrid, you're a wizard. And I think, Sean, you're a wizard, mate. The fact that he was able to
you got to tweet that and we'll get that framed, Jack.
I need to get someone to Photoshop for any graphic designers out there at the JMN JVT slide into the DMs. But it's insane that he was able to get off this contract. It's one of the worst contracts in the league. The Knicks right now are looking at buying out and stretching Joakim Noah, who is an equally immovable albatross of a contract. So the fact we were able to move it and then it got moved again, like Nick was saying, it's pretty hilarious. But enough bad words can't be said about Timothy Mozgov. You're going to trash our franchise on the way out. We'll trash you while on the way out as well, mate.
Yeah, I think that was a really big point, too. The fact that I think the Nets were okay keeping him around and letting him expire, but then the fact he came out and started saying negative things about the Nets and then negative things about Kenny, questioning his coaching and saying that he didn't give him a reason for not playing. And I just honestly want to be like, Mozgov, you should just watch the film and you know why you're not playing.
Yeah, exactly.
Bro, it's not that hard to tell. I mean, I don't personally think that Mozgov's even an NBA player anymore. He has the size, but he was just super slow, and he couldn't even hit a layup last season.
Well, I think, unfortunately, for a guy like him, when he entered the league, he was an NBA guy, but the league has just kind of changed. Like, it's gone away from the bruiser, big guys, can't move up and down the court. I mean, if you put Yao Ming in his prime in this NBA, he's not going to be the same player that he was either. I mean, it's not going to be that slow kind of half court game anymore. And he's kind of a guy that the NBA evolved and he didn't evolve with it. So that's unfortunate, but that's the nature of the beast right now.
Yeah, and I would like to mention too, when he injured his knee with Cleveland, I believe he never really came back the same after that. He just lost some of the mobility and the vertical and that. And funny enough, I was talking to Orlando guy during the preview, and he was like, "Oh, Mozgov might see his minutes this season." I was like, "God bless."
Well, Cleveland traded a first rounder for him to Denver to get his contract, and to see what's happened to him in such a short space of time, it's a funny place, the NBA.
Exactly. Things can change. Like Nick said, the center position has drastically changed from where it was 10 years ago. But talking about free agent losses, we don't have to go through every guy, but you can just kind of say some points about somebody you like, well, you think that the Nets will miss. Quincy AC, Dante Cunningham, Jahlil Okafor, Nick Stauskas, James Webb, Milton Doyle. Out of these guys, what are the Nets really going to lose? And do you wish they kept any of them?
I was a little sad to see Dante Cunningham go, but again, I kind of knew the chances of him coming back were going to be great. I think when he came in, I mean, he added a lot to the team. I mean, he was kind of a great front court guy, nice stretch four, knew how to play a role, decent defender. So I mean, I really enjoyed watching him last year, but really there wasn't a single player that Brooklyn lost that I think is going to come back to bite him. It's not going to be like in the Billy King era, where just like players were walking all the time, and then you go and see them have like huge monster seasons with other teams. I don't think you're going to see that from the free agents that Brooklyn lost this year.
I'm going to miss the Quincy AC gifts.
On the bench, that was awesome.
Yeah, that's pro. And there's a part of me that's going to miss the Quincy AC experience. It just like, but at the same time, for my sanity and for the, I've got a nice lock of hair right now. I don't want to lose any more of it. Thanks to Quincy AC nights, jacking up threes, his life depends on it. But at the same time, he gave us. He was a heart and soul guy, like I mentioned of other players before. But the other guys, I think, hopefully they find success wherever they land. I think Milton Doyle said some nice things about D'Angelo Russell on his way out. And I think, the subtractions, like Nick mentioned, there's not going to be a heat miss, so to speak.
Yeah, they did a great job replacing all the guys with better players. And, Cunningham, like you said, Nick, we was kind of exciting to see him come in here, and he hit a really nice number from three, and he brought some more leadership to the team. But the guys they brought in, I'm okay losing him. I think he's in San Antonio now, so that should work out for him. But moving on to the prediction portion of the show, who's going to be the Nets starting five on opening night?
I think it's going to be the starting five we saw a lot last season. It's going to be D'Lo, Crabbe, Damari, Rondé, and Jarrett.
Yep, I think that if it changes, it'll be because of injury. But I think that we're invested in all of those guys in different ways. That I think that's likely to be at least for the first maybe 20, 30 games, unless something crazy happens.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I think it's going to be the same thing. Now, if you saw somebody jump into the starting lineup, who would it be?
I think we could see LeVert jump into the starting lineup.
Like to hear, Nick. I already liked you before the show, but I definitely like you even more.
And I mean, maybe you never know. You could see Dinwiddie again. No, Joe's the perfect like flamethrower off the bench. And I mean, with the way Kenny's rotations are, and there's not so much like a starting unit that a bench unit. It's like you start with the starters, and then you kind of just like skillfully weave everyone else into the lineup.
Yeah.
So that's how that works. I think Crabbe is going to be a guy that's going to be tough to replace. I really think that now that everyone's kind of back and healthy and everything, he's going to show you why he was worth all that money this year.
Yeah, we saw his form towards the end of the season. I'm going to steal some hosting duties from you, Nick. What's the Nets' best closing lineup?
That's a tough one. I'm going to take the cheap answer on this one, and it definitely depends on who you're facing because you want to match it up a little bit. But I think they'll.
Who has to stay? Like, out of that starting lineup, is Jared Allen a lock? Is Rondé a lock? Is Crabbe a lock? Does Crabbe get replaced by a guy like Harris who's shown a bit more on defense? Does LeVert come in for a guy? Does he still have the sort of tenacity to kick around? Like, are there any sort of major changes? Who can you see like usurping them? Is it like we sort of mentioned, Harris and such?
I think again, it's going to be like who's hot that night. It's
Yeah.
like D'Lo is going to be the guy because he's such a great creator. Crab is he's very clutch. He is an incredible 3-point shooter. Damari kind of brings some veteran decision making. He's a good defender. He's very switchable on defense, so that's important. Rondé, in my opinion, is like one of the most important pieces to what makes this roster work. He can defend. He could rebound. He can pass. He's usually right up there with Steph Curry as far as individual pace numbers. So, I mean, he really holds the keys to a lot of what Brooklyn wants to do and what Kenny Atkinson wants to do specifically. And Jared Allen, you never know. I mean, if now that Ed Davis is on the roster, if Davis is going to be a better matchup, or if Davis isn't getting pushed front of the block where Jared Allen is, like say we're going up against Embiid or another big skilled center like that, you might see Davis take some late game minutes away from Jarrett. But I think Jarrett's going to be more reliable down the stretch this year.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised too if they went small sometimes to close. You know, maybe if it was even Rondé at the 5, which they did a little bit last year, if you put on a little bit more size. But I think Karras would be a guy that can kind of get in there. But like Nick said, I think it's all about who's having a good game, who's hot, who's playing defense. I remember, I want to say early last season against Portland, Rondé was playing such good defense. Kenny left him in the entire fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think that was one of the highest minutes played by a net all season, like 36, 37 minutes. So I want to see, hopefully, Coach Kenny ride the guys a little bit more in that sense. You know, if D'Lo's having a big game, if Rondé's having a big game, if even Spencer's having a big game, or Karras, you know, letting those guys sort of run it out a little bit up. But at the same time, there's a lot to juggle for him. But yeah, I think it's going to depend on matchups, like you guys mentioned.
Yeah, it is tough for Kenny too. I think a lot of people think his job's so easy, but now he has like a little bit more options in terms of depth. It's like, you know, who do they want to play more? Who do they want to see from more? Because there is player development. Obviously, the Nets want to be competitive, but they want to know what they have with some of these guys, especially when their contract coming up.
I think one thing too that shouldn't go unnoticed is there were a lot of times last year, especially down the stretch of games, where D'Lo was kind of not doing so well, kind of making some bad decisions. Kenny pulls him in favor of Dinwiddie, who's been playing well, and Dinwiddie finishes the job. So I think that Kenny's definitely been someone that demonstrates that it doesn't matter really who you are. It matters what you've done that game, how you're playing that game, and what you can offer against that opponent.
Yep.
Yeah, that was pretty spot on. And talking about D'Lo, I think this might be a popular pick. Who's going to be a breakout starter for the Nets this season?
I think it's going to be, there's so many guys that could. Like D'Lo is a guy that could really take the jump from being like a good player to a borderline an all-star to an all-star. Jared Allen is a guy that could keep improving in leaps and bounds. And Crab is another guy that is going to be marked for me. When I mentioned earlier that I'm kind of like always watch Portland and I'm a little bit of a Portland fan. Crab was a part of my favorite Portland teams. And when he was at his best is when everything was kind of working for him. And then just before he was moved to Brooklyn, he was at his best when CJ and Dame were doing their thing. Last year, that just wasn't the case for the Nets. There were different injuries. The lineup was always changing. He was always asked to do a little bit more, a little bit less. So, I think having consistency around him is going to really let him blossom into the player that everyone thought he was going to be.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I'm going to go with D'Lo. And, you know, in those 12 games before he got hurt, he was averaging 21 points a game, 5.7 assists, 4.7 rebounds, a steal in only 27 minutes. Now, those are elite numbers. Yes, they might be inflated in some ways, but if he gets those numbers, you know, on 30 minutes a night, you know, those are insane numbers. If he could do it in an efficient way, that's the number one thing. I think the goal that we mentioned, Nick and I mentioned on the buzz, of him trying to get a 50, 40, 90 season is going to be really promising. You know, the fact he wants to become a more efficient player. But yeah, I think those assist numbers and those assist highlights are going to be fun to watch. So I think for me, it's got to be D'Lo because he is the sort of crux for us going forward. You know, if he can become a borderline all-star, then, you know, maybe we don't need to target Kyrie Irving in free agency. But at the same time, yeah, you could easily throw a dart at the board and any of these guys could be in that conversation.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of options, and I'm going to go with D'Lo. But to touch on Crab, I think another important point would be he sprained his ankle, I believe, in training camp last year. It probably hurt him a little bit getting to know the system. He looked a lot more comfortable in 2018 than the 2017 portion of the season, so I think that'll benefit him. And like Jack mentioned earlier in the show, he really had a hot streak at the end of the season. So I think Crab's a guy. Yeah.
Was it the 41-point performance? Was it just? It was insane. He was just lights out.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, just think the better D'Lo plays, the easier it'll be for Crab.
Yeah.
Because D'Lo
Yeah.
is such a guy. He's so slippery. I mean, he's so deadly in the pick and roll. I mean, how he can pass to Jarrett and everything. But I mean, the defense kind of is sucked into whatever D'Lo is doing. And in addition to that, D'Lo is awesome at driving and kicking. So I mean, you drive and kick out to a wide open Crab, and I mean that's a bucket right there. I mean, it doesn't get much easier than that.
Yeah, and I think about D'Lo, one reason I think the breakout, obviously we've seen the offseason work. His body looks great, taking care of that, getting a little bit more athletic, and then just having a better idea of the role he's expected. You mentioned the passing, Nick, and I felt like at the end of last season, we saw some really brilliant stretches from him where he was just, having dimes and dimes after dimes. One game against Orlando, I just remember him, it was like 10 plus assists, and he was just amazing. And I think this year he's going to focus more on making his teammates better. So that's why I'm really excited about his game taking the next level.
Yeah, the triple-double. If we put a number, how many triple-doubles do you think, if healthy, he plays 82, 75, 82 games, how many triple-doubles do you think D'Lo can get? Because he got one, I believe, last season. That was one of his best games, my favorite game of his. Is there an over-under of like 5?
I think he's just over 5. If he's totally healthy, he's definitely going to be someone that's going to be passing a lot more. He's a beautiful passer, but at the same time, it's kind of like the double-edged sword. You kind of have to live with the passes that don't work out, because the ones that do, you're like, oh my gosh, how did it happen? Well, it almost didn't happen. That's how it happened. Yeah. And so you kind of have to live with that. And I think as he matures and as he just gets better and better and better, we're going to see more of those types of passes that are just like, oh, how do you even see that? How do you make that? And they're going to work out. It's not going to end up being a tip out of bounds or a turnover. It's going to end up being a good assist.
Yeah, honestly, in my opinion, he's one of the best bounce passers in the league. Like, there's not many guys who can bounce the ball away. He can, so that's something to keep an eye on as well. And I think it should be easy for him to get the 10 points and the 10 assists. Is going to be the rebounds where he needs to work on probably a little bit, get in the paint a little bit more. But breakout bench player for the Nets.
Breakout bench player, I think it's going to be Fareed. I think Harris is going to be a guy that could also break out. And again, like I'm really high on Musa. I think if he hits that like 15-20 minute mark, he's going to be a guy that feasts off of open looks from 3. He's going to be a guy that in transition can run the floor and finish with a dunk, or run the floor and pass it to someone and really make teammates better. So I think that any of those 3 guys are going to be huge. Harris is a guy that could come in and really become one of the true elite shooters in basketball and really get into that Korver territory. And Fareed is a guy that, again, I think he's going to be a pretty good fit. Like, I'm of the school of thought, you don't need everyone to shoot the 3. You don't need 1 through 5 shooting the 3. And he's going to be a guy that's going to clean up a lot of looks. He's going to be running in transition, and he's going to be playing with a ton of intensity. So I think that he, again, could be, in comparison to his past couple of years in Denver, really blow up.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said. I'll throw another name into the mix, Spencer Dinwiddie. I think if he is given a specific role, I think we sort of talked about consistency with some of our other players. We haven't said a lot about Spencer Dinwiddie, but I think the role that he took on in the absence of D'Angelo and Jeremy was absolutely insane. He won us games. I mentioned the Detroit performance, the Cleveland performance. There are so many other games that without Spencer Dinwiddie, the Nets aren't even in it. So for me, I think if he is given, a specific role to be sort of, the sixth man, we want you, if Coach Kenny goes to him, we want you to be in the sixth man of the year conversation, then I certainly think that he can be in that conversation. Third and most improved player voting. I think that Spencer Dinwiddie, with his effectiveness and with his skill set, one of the best passes, one of the smartest passes when it comes to, his assist to turnover ratio. Him and Chris Paul are probably, in a league of their own in many ways. So I think, I think Spencer Dinwiddie is getting a little bit more respect as well, a little bit more credence, from people around him, because, he's jabbing a little bit on Twitter and such about his 2K rating. The sort of Enes Kanter beef, I think was really fun. So I think Spencer Dinwiddie's in for a big season. And I think off the bench, as a makeshift starter, I think that Spencer Dinwiddie is going to have a big one.
Yeah, all great picks. And talking about Dinwiddie, being in that role last season with Lim being out, D'Angelo being out, doing things that he probably was never asked to do. And we mentioned a little bit on the Buzz, Jack, we felt like he got a little fatigued. Now this year, he'll be able to be a little bit more efficient, having a better idea what to do. But I wouldn't be a fan if I didn't go with my guy, Karis LeVert. I think he's going to have a big season. You see him putting in work. No one's really talking about it. I also think he showed some nice flash at the end of last season. I believe a game against the Clippers, he put up like 28 points. And then coming off picks last year, towards the end of the season, he looked a lot better shooting the three ball. So he's able to get a knockdown three ball off the pick, and then his playmaking ability, being 6'7", seeing over the smaller guards, I think he could have a really nice season. And like we mentioned, possibly find his way into the starting lineup. Yeah, that's my dog. So I mean, I'm definitely biased when it comes to Karras, but I'm hoping big things. I also like his two-way ability. The fact that he can play defense. I think he led the Nets in deflections last year, so always a positive when you play some D.
I think that he was honestly one of the biggest reasons that Jared Allen was able to emerge. There was a stretch of like 5 or 10 games where it was just every single time they were like the bench unit. He was the 2 and Jarrett was the 5. And they would run pick and roll, and I love the way that LeVert kind of like it's almost like he makes you commit to him scoring, and then he wraps a pass around your back, or I mean, at the very last second, passes it off to Allen for a wide open dunk, and I think that was just so crucial in bringing Jarrett out of his shell.
I feel like out of like the hundreds of clips I posted of the Nets last season, 25% were Caris LeVert to Jared Allen alley-oops.
I think Damari said as well on a recent podcast that he has potential. I think that, he could spend some time, whether it's next year or the year after, as a 4, because he has that size. I think he has that switchability, and he's going to improve, obviously, his strength. His versatility, I think, is going to be an absolute weapon for the Nets going forward. And I think defense, if he continues to improve on that mark, it's going to only enhance him further.
In a recent interview with Slam, they mentioned his competitive side. He's such a soft-spoken guy. Kenny said he's one of the nicest people on the team and very coachable. But I want to see more of that aggressiveness, more of that attacking mentality, because I think he has the tools. It's more about the mindset and kind of changing that a little bit. But moving on from there, I do got to shout out my co-host. He wanted me to give his predictions for breakout players. Corey Waldron, starter D'Angelo Russell, breakout bench player Caris LeVert. You can tell he hangs out with me a lot. But moving on to season predictions, best case scenario for the Nets.
So my best case scenario is just sneaking into the playoffs. I mean, the East is so much weaker than the West. The top of the East is very good. Don't get me wrong, but it's kind of like that 6 through 10 range that is really it's kind of a toss up. And the Nets are kind of projected, to finish 10th in the East or so, but that's like it's a 10th that's not separated by too much. I mean, you have to beat Cleveland, which I think is definitely doable now that LeBron's gone, and we saw what that team was like even with LeBron. I mean, it was when he was off the floor, they were a lottery team, and I'm not too high on the Wizards with Dwight. I think that's kind of gonna implode. I know there are a lot of writers that are super high on Dwight being on that team, and I could beat my bowl of crow later in the season, but I just don't think that's gonna work out. I didn't think Charlotte got a whole lot better this offseason, but again, there are a lot of what ifs, and if Brooklyn comes out, is super healthy and really plays hard, buys into the Kenny Atkinson system, buys into being like Houston East, then they could sneak into the playoffs. So that would be my best case scenario.
Yeah, that's my probably best case as well. I think Detroit are being mildly slept on in the fact that Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin are all-stars. They're proven all-stars. I think that they're probably going to be the likely. Maybe if they're 7th, then I think it might leave the 8th spot open, if Cleveland drop, obviously. So I think that this will be around that range. If we get into the high 30s, I think that's probably going to be, a playoff contention spot. So, yeah, that's the best case for me, high 30s in wins.
Yeah, for me, best case scenario is 40 wins. Yeah, I said 4-0. D'Angelo being an all-star, LeVert making a jump, Jared Allen looking like a beast, and Harrison Crabbe both shooting around 40% or maybe a little bit more. And like you guys mentioned, one thing that would concern me about Detroit is the point guard position. Reggie Jackson has a tendonitis. He's always banged up, so see what happens with them. But I think it's a real possibility. I'm not scared of any of the teams that are going to finish between 7-10 or 7-12. I think it's all kind of a mix right there, and it kind of depends on who's going to stay healthy. So best case scenario, Nets are in the playoffs, but worst case scenario?
Worst case scenario is obviously going to be everyone suffers a ton of injuries. That would really only be the bad side. Now, say everyone's healthy and the wins just don't happen. That's not too big a deal for me because, again, the Nets control their own destiny as far as the draft pick goes. I don't think they're going to strategically lose to get anything, but I mean, let's say everyone stays healthy. We see D'Lo make a jump, but not as big a jump. We see Crab kind of play at the same level. Joe Harris gets a little bit better. Everyone gets a little bit better. I think that's fine. So I don't think like, oh, we only won 20 games, but everyone was healthy. That's not a worst case scenario to me. The worst case is injuries.
Yeah, I don't think that there really is a worst case scenario. And I think Sean Marks put us in that position that was spoken at length on the Buzz and on this podcast. If we do go badly, we have 2 first-round picks, including Denver's one and our own one. So if we don't happen to get into that playoff range, there is room to maneuver in terms of strategically, getting a higher percentage. Obviously, those odds have smoothed out for the first time going into this season. But yeah, I think injuries, and we spoke ad nauseum on the Buzz, all season. We just suffer injuries, like there's no other. And when it comes to Brooklyn, I looked up, I think games missed, some website. We're in the middle of that range, funnily enough. But I think when it comes to key players, but we've got that depth now. So I think, worst case is we do suffer injuries, but we suffer so many that, maybe we don't see anything out of Jana. I think that for me might be a worst case as well.
Yeah, I think worst case, obviously, the injuries and the player development. If the guys don't take the jump, D'Angelo can't really make that jump. We're not sure what he is, and now we're going to free agency, and we don't know how much we should pay him. And then we're not able to sign any of the big guys. That would suck. And then I think if the defense continues to be horrendous, I mean, that's a disappointment as well. But overall, like you guys mentioned, if the team doesn't get a lot of wins, at least they have their pick back, which seems like the first time in 100 years. So thank God for Sean Marks making some smart moves. But what is your actual prediction for next season?
My actual prediction is they're gonna compete. They're gonna win some games, and they'll be close to the 8th seed. Will they get the 8th seed? Maybe, but if you asked me to put money on it, I probably wouldn't. Again, like it's gonna be all about youth development, all about letting the guys grow, seeing what they have on the court, seeing who could maybe be brought back. But it's gonna be a year where they do compete for the playoffs, and I think down the stretch they're gonna be within striking distance of the 8th seed. And maybe they'll get it, maybe they won't, but it's definitely going to be in the conversation, I think, for a good portion of the year.
Yeah, I think I'll go with actual prediction of 34, 35 wins, 47 or 48 losses. I think that is pushing enough for an 8th seed or around a 10th seed. I don't think the Nets right now are a playoff lock. So I think for me, then they need to show something at the start and going towards the All-Star break for me to sort of, have full confidence in them, like sort of Nick was saying.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with around 37, 38 wins. And, there's a potential at the 8th seed. I think it's a real possibility. I think last year we kind of mentioned it, but that was more like a long shot. This year, I think it's actually possible of guys who are to make the jump and the depth, kind of comes through if there is some small injuries. If you had to put a percentage on it, what percentage would you give the Nets to make the playoffs next year?
I'll go with 30, 39. 40% seems like a high number to me. So I'm going to go 39%.
I was going to go 45%, like between 40 45. Like could it happen? Yeah, but leaning more towards the no.
I guess I'll be the most optimistic, and I'll go with 46%.
Oh,
You're like the guy on Price is Right who goes like $1 above.
So I'll be the most optimistic. I mean, I just am not really scared of some of the other teams in the East. I could be wrong, but I think all have their flaws. Obviously, the Nets have their flaws, and I'm just banking a lot, I think, in Kenny and the player development. I think that's something that's kind of being slept on because we've seen all these guys make huge jumps every year. Like we talked about Rondé a lot. The previous season, he didn't have much of an offensive game at all. And now going to this season, he has a post game, he has a mid-range game, he can handle the ball, he can pass a little bit. Kenny had that 3-point shot. That's going to be big. And Nick mentioned before, Joe Harris spending a lot of time in the G League. Now he's a legit NBA player that teams wanted to sign this offseason. Same thing with Spencer Dinwiddie, huge jump. And Jared Allen, expected to be in the G League. Next thing you know, he's a starting center in the NBA and considered one of the best rookie bigs. So I'm pretty excited about the overall player development. I think that would kind of ruin my excitement about the Nets if some of these young guys don't improve anymore.
Well, I think another thing that's going to be key is, these guys aren't that, they're young, but they're not that young anymore. D'Lo and Rondé, they're going to their 4th year. Chris is going into his 3rd year. Everyone else on the team are vets and guys that have had like playoff experience. Like they don't want to lose. Like they're not guys that are coming in and be like, well, let's just go out there and see what happens. They're in we want to win mode, and you've heard that surrounding the team all off season. Sean Marks, Kenny Atkinson, they both said, we're not planning on losing. Now, if something bad happens and they have to reevaluate at the trade deadline, so be it. But right now, going into the season, it's not going to be a let's roll the dice and see what happens. They're playing to win, and I think they can.
And it's a big sell next year for free agency. I think they want to prove to the free agents next year, we're a serious team. We're trying to make that jump in terms of winning. And like Nick said, a lot of the guys that are on the team, the new free agent acquisitions, they've talked about trying to compete for the playoffs. So I think that's exciting. Another shout out for Corey. He wanted me to give his picks for the wins. Best case scenario, he said 41 wins. Worst case, 28 wins. And actual prediction, 35 wins. He didn't mention anything about playoffs. I'll have to bother him about that. But moving on from the season predictions, the truth. What emoji would represent the Nets for you?
For me, it's the smirk emoji. Big into the smirk emoji in my emoji game, but you never know. Like it's kind of like that's the negotiations that whenever Sean Marks makes a deal, you throw the smirk emoji on it because he just fleeced you.
I like that.
I'll go with, for those that follow me, I put this out a lot after David Aldridge called it sort of the fight in the apple, and I've been sort of all about the apple fight between us and the Knicks. So I'm going with the apple emoji. I was fretting between, with Nick off the pod about what is it? It's the red apple or is it the green apple? I'm a red apple fan, so we are the red apple emoji from now on. The New York Knicks, for all listeners, they are the green apple. So if we are tweeting out apple emojis, red apple for the win.
I like it, Jack. That apple fight you've been kind of projecting out there with the hashtags. For me, it's simple. It's going to be a heart emoji because I love the Nets. Nothing. Yeah,
Dude.
So usually I get really creative, but I'm going to go simple today because the Nets are simply something I'm obsessed with for an irrational reason, especially with the Billy King trades. But league pass rating, 1 through 10, where do the Nets sit?
I think right in that 7 to 8 range. I mean, they're an exciting team, and Jared Allen baptized Lauri Markkanen last year.
Oh yeah,
D'Lo is one of the most crafty passers around. And everyone on NBA Twitter has kind of been really high on them since the season ended. So I think it's going to be a team that people tune into. And on top of all of that, they really do have, in my opinion, the best broadcasting team out there.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
And Barclays it's such a wonderful atmosphere. I mean, it was just such a joy. It's a pleasure to turn into the games because I love watching the fans. I love watching Allie Love interact with people. I love listening to Sarah and Ian and Ryan and everyone that's surrounding the team. I mean, it's an awesome experience, top to bottom.
It is, and I crave every time I get to watch a Nets game, and hopefully I'm in some part of the world that allows me to watch it at a reasonable hour. But obviously for me it's a 10. But Evan Dial has a piece for OTGBasketball.com on the teams and their sort of league pass rankings, so to speak, and he's relatively high on the Nets as well. And if I was an objective fan, I would probably have him at a 7.5 as well.
Yeah, like you guys said, for me personally, it's a 10. I don't miss a game, and the broadcasting crew, they just are so great. Even when the Nets weren't good, they brought such good energy for a bad team, and that's really something that's hard to do when you're talking about certain topics. And they've done a great job with that. Even in blowouts, they kind of bring up some funny stuff. And Ian Eagle is just a guy, even podcasting and doing any type of NBA talk, you can kind of steal some things from him because he's so great. But for an average NBA fan, I think you guys are right, a 7 or 8, because they do have a lot of exciting young pieces. They still play at a high pace. They shoot a lot of threes. High-scoring games. The defense isn't great, so it's usually pretty fun.
Well, I think, too, when talking about League Pass, you can't underrate the broadcast team because you look at a team like the Celtics that is just super – they have a lot of great pieces and awesome, but that broadcasting team, in my opinion, is the worst in the league. I've never heard so much dead air. It's just like a couple old guys going back and forth. It's terrible, and it makes the games almost unwatchable unless you're a diehard Celtics fan.
Yeah,
so
Toronto's sort of a broadcast team as well. They're really, really good. You tune into games. There's times where I'd like to prefer to watch the home broadcast team, and then there's times where it's just man, can I just listen to I guess it's better than Mark Jackson and Jeff Van Gundy half the time.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. It's definitely sometimes can be annoying, and it makes you want to almost put your TV on mute just because the stuff they're saying is so irrational too, and they are such homers. But moving on from there, last question of the day. Actually, not last question. I lied. But what TV show would you watch over the Nets? Obviously, we're all Nets fans, so it's going to be a give or take. So I'll say, with a gun to your head, you had to pick a TV show to watch over the Nets.
I mean, the only way I'd miss the Nets game is if Game of Thrones was on.
That's what me and Corey, my co-host, are saying. If there's the series finale of Game of Thrones could be a possibility.
Oh, I mean,
Yeah.
I gotta say, I've been waiting for the new season so much. Like, if when the season finally drops, it's supposed to come out like early next year. Like, if it's February, March, like I'm totally gonna watch Game of Thrones over at Nets games if it's on Sundays.
I mean, there'll be hundreds of millions of people that will join you in saying that, Nick. I'd probably be around that range. I'm not as big a Game of Thrones fan. I was chatting to Nick again, off the pod. There are very few shows that I would, obviously. For me, the only thing that would probably take me away from the Nets would be like an office reunion show. You get John Krasinski back, you get Steve Carell back. That's a key for me. And I liked Ed Helms as well. For all the haters out there, I'm a big Ed Helms fan. Bring back Jenna Fisher and the rest of the cast, Creed, Mindy, everyone. For me, unless it's an office reunion show, one of my favorite shows of all time, then I'm tuning into Iron Eagle and our Nets boys do their thing.
Honestly, I almost forgot about Game of Thrones because I haven't watched it in so long. It just feels like the last time was so long ago, and it feels like every episode in this new season is going to be like a movie. So that's kind of exciting. But Game of Thrones might be up there. I'd say if I had a TV show, probably my top 2 favorite TV shows are X-Files or Rick and Morty. I know they're completely different, but maybe if something crazy were to happen with them, but Nets are usually winning every situation.
True.
But guys, just one last question. Prediction, if you had to predict, this is for the following offseason, what free agent are the Nets going to sign or free agent?
Oh man, that's so tough.
Yeah, it's a super hot take, optimistic, whatever you want to throw out there. You can say 0 if you think that way, but if you want to be really hopeful, you can put out some big names.
Look, we've got Kevin Durant on the market, we've got Kawhi Leonard, we've got Kyrie Irving, we've got Jimmy Butler. Those are the guys. You can chuck in Tobias Harris, Chris Middleton as well. The Nets might go for guys like that as well. But I would probably say I'm going to go Kawhi Leonard because I'm super optimistic, and I'm a big fan of Kawhi. 27, one of the best wing defenders of all time with like Scottie Pippen. So I'm Team Kawhi, Team Claw, despite the fact that he uses purple font for some weird reason.
Yeah, I think I'd definitely go Kawhi. I think he's the guy that probably has the best shot.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I want Jimmy Butler. I mean,
honestly, I was thinking
see how
about that with
divisive
8.
he is and everything with the Timberwolves team. And I mean, I don't want to come in here and be like, oh, I don't want to teach G-Law to do this, or I don't want to. Jared Allen, he's weak. He's not the guy I'm used to. I mean, I don't want that. He's old. He's been injured. I mean, he's an old 29. Like Tom Thibodeau has run him into the ground every single year. Yeah. So I mean, I think he's going to be a guy that has a drop off. So
that would be my major concern as well. And then you're giving him big money. It's going to be on a huge contract. And then, like you said, with Tibbs, we've seen a lot of other Bulls guys like Joakim Noah, he just completely fell off the map when he signed with the Knicks. Obviously, some of that is his fit in the NBA, but a lot of that is just the minutes and being banged up so much. So Jimmy Butler is somewhat scary. If you had the option to pair 2 Nets, my pick would have been Kawhi as well, because I just love Kawhi. And I think there is some connection between the former Spurs stuff and whatnot. But you had 2 guys you could add to the Nets by choice of the free agents. You're just making it happen. Who would it be? Kawhi and who?
I guess Kawhi and Kyrie.
Yeah, I think Kawhi. Look, I'm going to go Kawhi and KD.
I was thinking that.
Yeah, why not?
KD, I don't think his game is going to be one that is going to get worse dramatically. I think that for a long period of time, and with what LeBron is showing at going into his age 34 season, Kevin Durant is 30 going on 31. There's nothing to say that KD can't keep up his high level of elitism, of elite play. So Kawhi and KD on the same team.
2 of the top 5 players on the Nets.
Literally. And you add in D'Angelo Russell into that mix. Man, guys, I know it's the morning, but I want to go back to sleep and just dream about that.
We're being way too optimistic, but you never know what Sean Marks can do. He's done
Speaking
a lot
into
of crazy
existence,
things.
guys. Speaking into existence, yeah.
But that wraps it up, and I got to say, this is probably one of my favorite NBA Outlet preview series I've ever done, especially on the Nets. Probably done this for 3 years now, so big shout-out to Nick, big shout-out to Jack, and you guys let them know where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at Nick_LT. I'm with, like we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I've been with Nets Daily for a year or so. I cover the WNBA for WNBA Insider. I have my own little project, the Charity Stripe, which all proceeds go towards taking care of school lunch debt for elementary school kids for free. So that's something I'm passionate about.
So if you didn't think you could like Nick anymore, now you do.
And you can also find me at the new project, netsrepublic.com. It's a site I'm retaking over. I used to be with a site called brooklyn.com, which was a pun on Brooke Lopez and Jeremy Lin. both of those guys have gone by the wayside. So we've done a little bit of rebrand and super excited. We're relaunching that site probably middle of next week. So definitely keep your eyes peeled for that.
Absolutely, I will be. I'm at the J-Man JBT. Slide into the DMs. I'm going to be putting out, plenty of Nets content over the days. I've been, quite surprised at the receptive nature you guys have been to. The little meme I put out of "I'm trying Jennifer" for Sean Marks. I didn't expect to get any likes on that, but I got like 20. So that was fun. And I'm going to be starting to sort of jack off. Some other guys have been sort of doing like highlights with stats. I really like that. I'm going to focus on the Nets, sort of hijack sort of what Nick's been doing with his moments, but in a less sort of concrete and detailed way, just to sort of provide that Nets content for you guys. And obviously co-host the JBT podcast. If you guys want to hit that up, jbtpodcast@gmail.com.
Oh, and not the Brooklyn Buzz, Jack?
Oh, obviously
Just
the
kidding.
Brooklyn Buzz, and make sure we've got some very fun things in the works for that. We're really, really appreciative of all the love we've been getting on that.
And you guys can find me at OTG Basketball, OTG Nick, whatever. It's all about these two. They've done an astounding job. So shout out to everybody. You can check out the show on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, and Dash Radio. You all have a great night.